In the small town of Pinewood, 13-year-old Sophia Carter rescues an injured stray dog, Finn, and discovers he's been abused by Tobias Bennett, a cruel trainer running an illegal dog trafficking operation. Determined to protect Finn, Sophia and her father Mark confront Tobias, exposing his crimes with the help of their community and Officer Daniels. After Tobias is arrested, Sophia uncovers a map revealing a larger network of dog trafficking facilities. Together with Finn and the Pinewood community, she leads a daring mission to shut down the operation, rescuing dozens of dogs and bringing the perpetrators to justice. Along the way, Finn becomes a symbol of resilience and loyalty, while Sophia finds her voice as a leader in the fight against animal cruelty. The story ends with a message of hope, community strength, and the power of compassion. What do you think of Sophia and Finn's journey? Where are you watching this from? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to DG Story for more exciting and heartfelt stories. In the small, picturesque town of Pinewood, nestled among towering pine forests in Oregon, life moved at a slow, predictable pace. The air smelled of fresh pine needles and the occasional whiff of apple pie from the local diner. It was a town where everyone knew each other's names. Yet for Sophia Carter, it often felt like she was alone in a crowd. Sophia, a 13-year-old girl with curious green eyes and fiery red hair, had always been adventurous and outgoing. That was before the accident. 2 years ago, a tragic car crash took her mother's life, leaving her and her father, Mark, to navigate the world on their own. Mark, a skilled mechanic, had thrown himself into his work to avoid dealing with his grief, leaving Sophia to fend for herself emotionally. Their once warm and lively home had become quiet, marked by awkward silences and distant glances. Sophia found solace in the woods that surrounded their town. The towering trees seemed to whisper secrets only she could hear, and the soft crunch of leaves under her boots provided a strange comfort. One crisp autumn afternoon, while wandering deeper into the woods than usual, she heard a faint whimper. Curious, she followed the sound, weaving through the trees until she came upon a sight that made her heart ache. Lying on the damp forest floor was a dog, a mix of husky and something else, with a coat of gray and white fur matted with mud. One of his legs was bent at an awkward angle, and a series of scars ran along his side. His piercing blue eyes, filled with a mix of fear and pain, locked onto hers. He growled softly, warning her to stay back, but his weakened state betrayed his bravado. Sophia knelt slowly, her voice soft. "Hey, buddy, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." She pulled a granola bar from her pocket, broke off a piece, and extended it toward him. The dog sniffed the air cautiously before inching closer, his eyes never leaving hers. He took the food with a quick snap and retreated, chewing slowly. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" Sophia murmured. She noticed the fresh wound on his leg, likely from some kind of trap, and the older scars that told a story of prolonged suffering. "I can't just leave you here." With painstaking care, Sophia gained the dog's trust. Using her jacket as a makeshift sling, she managed to carry the injured animal back to the edge of the woods and toward her home. It was a struggle, but the thought of leaving him behind wasn't an option. By the time they reached the backyard, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the quiet town. Sophia carefully placed the dog in the old shed behind their house, a space her father rarely visited. She rummaged through the garage, finding an old blanket and a first aid kit. As she cleaned his wounds, the dog whimpered but didn't resist. "You need a name," she said, her hands working gently. "How about Finn? You look like a Finn." Finn's ears twitched at the name, and for the first time, his tail gave a faint wag. Sophia smiled, a feeling of warmth filling the void that had been in her chest for so long. That evening, Sophia sat with Finn in the shed, whispering to him about her mother, her school, and how she often felt invisible in Pinewood. For the first time in years, she felt like someone or something was truly listening. But she knew this peace wouldn't last. Her father, Mark, wasn't one to keep secrets, and she doubted he'd be thrilled about a stray dog in their backyard. As the stars began to dot the night sky, Sophia resolved to protect Finn, no matter what it took. The next morning, Sophia awoke with a start. The memory of Finn came rushing back, and she quickly threw on a jacket before sneaking out the back door. The chilly autumn air bit at her cheeks as she tiptoed to the shed. She opened the door slowly, half expecting Finn to have vanished in the night. But there he was, curled up on the old blanket she had left for him. His piercing blue eyes flicked up to her as she entered. He was alert, but there was no growling this time, only a quiet, watchful gaze. "Good morning, Finn," Sophia said softly, crouching beside him. She offered him a slice of toast she had snuck from the kitchen. Finn sniffed it cautiously before taking it from her hand. Chewing slowly, his tail wagged ever so slightly, and Sophia couldn't help but grin. She spent the morning in the shed, talking to Finn and cleaning his wounds again. He flinched at her touch but didn't pull away. "You're tough, you know that?" she said, tying a fresh bandage around his injured leg. "But you're safe now, I promise." The sound of the back door opening startled them both. Finn's ears perked up, and Sophia quickly placed a hand on his head to calm him. She peeked through the small window of the shed and saw her father, Mark, heading to the garage. Sophia's heart raced. She had managed to hide Finn for now, but how long could she keep it up? Her father was bound to notice eventually. That evening, over dinner, the tension in the Carter household was palpable. Sophia poked at her food, her thoughts consumed by Finn. Mark noticed her distraction and set down his fork. "You've been quiet today," he said. "Everything okay?" Sophia hesitated, unsure of how much to say. "Yeah, just thinking about school," she lied. Mark raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. "Well, if something's bothering you, you can talk to me, you know." Sophia nodded but kept her gaze down. She wanted to believe that her father would understand about Finn, but she wasn't ready to take that risk yet. The next few days passed in a blur of secrecy. Sophia woke up early every morning to check on Finn, sneaking him food and water when her father wasn't around. Finn grew more comfortable with her presence, even wagging his tail when she arrived. Sophia began to notice little things about him, how he perked up at the sound of her voice, how his ears twitched when he heard a squirrel in the yard, and how his tail thumped against the ground whenever she called his name. One afternoon, as Sophia sat in the shed brushing the dirt from Finn's fur, she noticed something unusual. Finn had a scar on his side, shaped almost like a brand. She ran her fingers over it, and Finn flinched, letting out a low whimper. "What happened to you, Finn?" she whispered. The scar looked deliberate, as if someone had intentionally burned or marked him. A chill ran down her spine at the thought. Later that day, as she walked home from school, Sophia's mind was still on Finn. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the group of boys from her class until it was too late. "Well, if it isn't Sophia Carter," one of them sneered, stepping into her path. Sophia recognized them immediately, Jacob and his friends, the town bullies. They loved picking on anyone they perceived as weaker than them. And Sophia had been a target ever since she started keeping to herself after her mother's death. "Where you off to in such a hurry?" Jacob asked, smirking. "Leave me alone," Sophia said, trying to step around them, but Jacob blocked her way. "What's the rush? Got a little secret you're hiding?" Sophia's heart pounded. She clutched her backpack tighter, willing them to move, but Jacob reached out and grabbed her arm. "Let go!" she shouted, trying to pull away. Suddenly, a low growl cut through the air. Sophia turned to see Finn, standing at the edge of the woods. His fur bristled, and his blue eyes locked onto Jacob. "Whoa, where'd that mutt come from?" one of the boys said, taking a step back. Jacob laughed nervously. "What's the matter, dog? You don't scare me." Finn growled louder, baring his teeth. Sophia took the opportunity to yank her arm free and step back. "Finn, it's okay," she said quickly, her voice steady but firm. "Stay." To her relief, Finn obeyed, though his body remained tense. The boys backed away, muttering insults under their breath as they retreated. Sophia knelt beside Finn, her hands trembling. "You followed me?" she whispered, stroking his fur. Finn licked her hand in response, his eyes softening. It was in that moment Sophia realized just how much Finn had come to trust her, and how much she trusted him in return. That night, as Sophia sat in the shed with Finn, she knew she couldn't keep him a secret forever. Her father would have to find out eventually, and when he did, she could only hope he would see Finn the way she did, as more than just a stray dog, but as a loyal friend and protector. The following morning, Sophia decided it was time to tell her father about Finn. The encounter with Jacob and his friends the day before had left her shaken, but it also made her realize something important. She couldn't keep Finn hidden forever. "Dad, can we talk?" she asked hesitantly over breakfast. Mark glanced up from his plate, surprised by her serious tone. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Sophia hesitated, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "I found a dog in the woods. He's hurt, and I've been taking care of him in the shed." Mark's brow furrowed. "You brought a stray dog here? Sophia, you know that's not safe. It could be sick or dangerous." "He's not dangerous," Sophia interrupted, her voice trembling. "He's sweet, and he's been through a lot. I couldn't just leave him out there." Mark sighed, rubbing his temples. "Sophia, I know you mean well, but we can't keep a stray dog. It's not practical. We'll take him to the animal shelter today, and they'll find him a good home." Sophia's chest tightened. "No, you don't understand. Finn trusts me. He's been hurt by someone. I can see it in his scars. He deserves better than a cage at some shelter." Mark paused, looking at his daughter's pleading expression. For the first time in months, she seemed alive, full of purpose. "Fine," he said reluctantly. "Let me see him first. But if I think he's a danger, he's going to the shelter." "Understood." Sophia nodded, relief flooding through her. "Understood." Mark followed Sophia to the shed, his skepticism evident in every step. When she opened the door, Finn stood up from the blanket, his ears perked and tail wagging slightly. Mark stopped in his tracks, his eyes narrowing as he studied the dog. "He's big," he muttered. Finn, sensing the tension, stepped forward cautiously. Sophia knelt beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his back. "It's okay, Finn. This is my dad." Finn sniffed the air, then lowered his head slightly, a gesture of submission. Mark watched in silence as the dog moved closer, finally letting out a soft whine and nudging Sophia's arm. "He's not aggressive," Sophia said quietly. "He just wants to feel safe." Mark sighed, his expression softening. "All right, we'll give him a chance. But if he shows any signs of aggression, he's out." "Got it. Got it," Sophia said, her smile wide. For a few days, things seemed to settle into a routine. Finn quickly adapted to his new environment, following Sophia everywhere and even warming up to Mark, who began sneaking him scraps from the dinner table. But the peace didn't last. One afternoon, as Sophia and Finn walked home from the park, they noticed a man putting up posters near the diner. The man was tall and well-dressed, with sharp features and a confident demeanor. Sophia's heart sank when she saw what he was posting. "Missing dog," the poster read, accompanied by a photo of a dog that looked almost identical to Finn. The name beneath the photo was Atlas. The man turned and caught Sophia staring. His eyes were cold but calculating, his smile polite but forced. "Hello there," he said smoothly. "You haven't happened to see this dog, have you?" Sophia hesitated, her grip tightening on Finn's leash. "No, I haven't." The man's eyes flicked to Finn, then back to her. "That's a beautiful dog you've got there. What's his name?" "Finn," Sophia said quickly. The man's smile didn't falter, but something about his gaze made her skin crawl. "Well, if you do see Atlas, let me know. He's very important to me." He handed her a flyer and walked away, leaving her standing frozen on the sidewalk. That evening, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling of unease. She told her father about the man and showed him the flyer. Mark studied it, his expression hardening. "You think this guy is looking for Finn?" "I know he is," Sophia said. "Finn has scars. That someone hurt him, and I think it was that man." Mark frowned. "You don't know that for sure. Maybe he really is just looking for his dog." "Then why did Finn seem scared of him?" Sophia shot back. Mark didn't have an answer for that. "We'll keep an eye out," he said finally. "But Sophia, if this man comes back, we need to be careful. I don't want you or Finn getting hurt." The man, Tobias Bennett, wasn't just looking for Finn, he was hunting him. Tobias ran a private dog training facility just outside of Pinewood, specializing in turning dogs into aggressive guard animals for profit. Finn, or Atlas, had been one of his most promising trainees until he escaped. Tobias had invested time and money into Finn, and he wasn't about to let a stray dog ruin his reputation. He began asking questions around town, offering rewards for any information. Word spread quickly, and soon, everyone in Pinewood seemed to know about the missing dog. Sophia and Mark tried to keep a low profile, but it wasn't easy. Tobias's presence loomed over the town like a storm cloud, and it was only a matter of time before he found out where Finn was hiding. Late one night, Finn began growling at the back door, his ears pinned back and body tense. Sophia peered outside and froze. A dark figure was moving through their backyard, flashlight in hand. "Dad!" she whispered urgently, shaking Mark awake. Mark grabbed a baseball bat and headed for the door, motioning for Sophia to stay behind. But Finn refused to be left out. He positioned himself between Sophia and the door, his growl low and menacing. As Mark stepped outside, the figure turned and bolted into the woods, disappearing into the shadows. "They're looking for him," Mark said grimly, locking the door behind him. "We need to be ready for whatever's coming." For days after the figure appeared in their backyard, the atmosphere in the Carter household was tense. Mark began double-checking the locks on the doors and windows, while Sophia rarely left Finn's side. The dog seemed to sense the unease, his alertness heightened with every creak of the floorboards or rustle of leaves outside. Despite their precautions, Tobias Bennett was always one step ahead. Late one night, while the Carters slept, his men made their move. Sophia jolted awake to the sound of barking. Finn's frantic growls echoed from the backyard, followed by the sound of shattering glass. She jumped out of bed, her heart pounding as she ran toward the noise. "Dad, Finn's in trouble," she shouted, racing down the hallway. Mark burst out of his room, holding the baseball bat he had kept by his bedside ever since Tobias's visit. Together, they ran to the back door, only to find it wide open. "Finn!" Sophia screamed, but there was no response, only the faint sound of tires screeching as a van sped away down the street. Mark grabbed Sophia's arm before she could chase after it. "No, we can't go after them like this." Tears streamed down Sophia's face as she stared at the empty backyard. "They took him," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They took Finn." The following morning, Sophia sat at the kitchen table, her eyes red and puffy from crying. Mark paced the room, his jaw clenched as he spoke to Officer Daniels, a local police officer who had arrived to take their statement. "They broke into my house and took my daughter's dog," Mark said, his voice laced with frustration. "You need to do something," Officer Daniels sighed. "We'll investigate, but without a license plate or a clear description of the suspects, it's going to be tough. Do you have any idea why someone would take your dog?" Sophia looked up, her voice trembling. "It's Tobias Bennett. He's been looking for Finn. He calls him Atlas. Finn ran away from him because he hurt him. He's dangerous." Daniels frowned. "Bennett has a clean record. He runs a legitimate business. at least on paper, without solid evidence. There's not much we can do. Mark slammed his fist on the table. So that's it? You're just going to let him get away with this? I'll keep an eye on Bennett, Daniel said, his tone firm but cautious. But you should be careful. People like him don't like being accused without proof. After Daniels left, Sophia turned to her father, her eyes filled with determination. We can't just wait for them to find Finn. We have to do something. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. Sophia, I don't know what else we can do. If the police can't help, we don't need the police. Sophia interrupted. We just need to find out where Bennett took him. Mark hesitated. And how do you propose we do that? Sophia pulled out her phone, opening a search page. Bennett's dog training facility is just outside of town. That's where he'll be. Mark frowned. Sophia, breaking into a private property isn't exactly a good idea. What choice do we have? Sophia shot back. If we don't act now, we might never see Finn again. Mark looked at his daughter, her fiery determination a mirror of her late mother's spirit. He sighed heavily. All right, but we do this carefully. That night, armed with flashlights, Mark's tools, and a pair of walkie-talkies, the father-daughter duo drove to the edge of Pinewood, stopping just short of Bennett's property. The facility was surrounded by tall fences, with security cameras positioned at every corner. We'll have to go around the cameras, Mark whispered, scanning the perimeter. And keep low. Sophia nodded, her heart racing as they crouched and made their way toward a side entrance. Mark used a pair of wire cutters to snip through the chain link fence, creating a small opening for them to crawl through. Inside, the facility was eerily quiet. Rows of metal cages lined the walls of the large warehouse, and the faint sound of whimpering dogs echoed in the darkness. Sophia's stomach turned as she saw the conditions the dogs were kept in: dirty cages, empty water bowls, and signs of neglect everywhere. Finn has to be here, she whispered, her flashlight sweeping over the rows of cages. Suddenly, a familiar bark cut through the silence. Sophia's head snapped toward the sound. That's him. She broke into a run, ignoring Mark's hushed calls to wait. At the far end of the warehouse, she found Finn in a large cage, his leg bandaged but his eyes wide with fear. Finn! Sophia cried, dropping to her knees in front of the cage. Finn barked and wagged his tail, his body pressing against the bars as if trying to reach her. Sophia fumbled with the lock, but it wouldn't budge. Mark! She called over her shoulder. I need help. Before Mark could reach them, the warehouse lights flickered on, flooding the space with harsh fluorescent light. Well, came a cold, familiar voice. What do we have here? Sophia turned to see Tobias Bennett standing at the entrance, flanked by two large men. His expression was calm, but his eyes burned with fury. You've got some nerve breaking into my facility, Tobias said, his voice dripping with condescension. You should have just stayed home, little girl. Sophia stood her ground, her hands gripping the bars of Finn's cage. You don't deserve him, she said, her voice shaking but resolute. Finn isn't yours. He doesn't belong to anyone. Tobias chuckled darkly. Oh, but he does. And now, so do you. He motioned to his men, who began advancing toward Sophia and Mark. Sophia's heart pounded as Tobias's men advanced toward her and Mark. Finn barked furiously from inside the cage, his teeth bared as if trying to defend Sophia even through the steel bars. The cold, fluorescent lights of the warehouse flickered slightly, casting eerie shadows across the room. Mark stepped in front of Sophia, gripping the wrench he had brought as a makeshift weapon. Stay back, he warned, his voice steady despite the tension in his body. Tobias smirked, crossing his arms. You think a wrench is going to stop me? I've dealt with people like you before, do-gooders who think they can waltz in and take what doesn't belong to them. Sophia glared at him, her voice trembling but defiant. You're the one who doesn't deserve him. Finn ran away from you because you hurt him. He's not your property, he's family. Tobias's smirk faded, replaced by a cold, calculating expression. I don't think you understand the situation. Little girl, that dog is worth more than you could imagine. And I'm not about to let him go because some sentimental teenager got attached. One of Tobias's men lunged toward them, but Mark swung the wrench, forcing him to back off. Sophia, get Finn out of here, Mark shouted. Sophia fumbled with the lock on Finn's cage, her hands trembling. The padlock was solid and wouldn't budge. I can't open it, she cried. Tobias motioned to his second man, who circled around to cut off their escape. You're not leaving this place with that dog, Tobias said coldly. In fact, neither of you are leaving at all. Sophia's mind raced. She needed to act fast. Her eyes darted around the room and landed on a set of keys hanging on the wall near Tobias. They were labeled, and one of them was marked holding pens. Finn let out a low growl, his body pressed against the bars as if urging Sophia to hurry. Taking a deep breath, Sophia darted toward the keys, dodging Tobias's men as they tried to grab her. Stop her, Tobias shouted, his calm demeanor cracking. Sophia reached the wall and grabbed the keys just as one of the men lunged at her. She ducked under his arm and sprinted back to Finn's cage, her heart racing. Her fingers fumbled as she tried each key, adrenaline making her movements clumsy. Come on, she muttered, her voice shaking. Finally, the lock clicked open, the cage door swung wide, and Finn leapt out, his injured leg barely slowing him down. He positioned himself between Sophia and Tobias's men, his growls deep and menacing. Tobias took a step back, his confidence wavering. Control that dog, he snapped at his men, but they hesitated. Finn's presence was enough to make even these hardened men think twice. Mark stepped up beside Sophia, his wrench still in hand. You've got two choices, he said, his voice steady and commanding. Let us walk out of here, or see what this dog is really capable of. For a moment, no one moved. The tension in the room was palpable. Tobias's men exchanged nervous glances, clearly reluctant to confront Finn. Tobias clenched his fists, his jaw tightening as he weighed his options. You think you've won? Tobias said, his voice low and dangerous. This isn't over. I'll come for that dog. And next time, you won't see me coming. Sophia met his glare, her fear replaced by resolve. We'll be ready, with Finn at their side. Sophia and Mark backed toward the exit. Tobias and his men didn't follow, though Tobias's icy stare burned into Sophia's memory. As they slipped out of the warehouse and into the cool night air, Sophia felt a surge of relief, but she knew this wasn't the end. Mark led the way back to the car, keeping a firm grip on Finn's leash. The dog's tail wagged slightly as if sensing their victory, but his ears remained alert, scanning their surroundings for any signs of danger. Once they were safely inside the car, Mark turned to Sophia. Are you okay? Sophia nodded, clutching Finn tightly. I'm fine, but Tobias isn't going to stop. Mark sighed, his expression grim. No, he won't, which means we need to be smart about what we do next. Back at home, Sophia sat with Finn in the living room, her hand resting on his head. The dog had calmed down, his breathing steady as he leaned against her. Mark paced the room, deep in thought. We need more than just Finn's scars to prove what Tobias is doing. Mark said, the police won't act unless we have solid evidence. Sophia looked at Finn, her eyes filling with determination. Then we'll get it. We'll expose him for what he really is. Mark hesitated. Sophia, this isn't a game. Tobias is dangerous. I know, Sophia said, but he's hurting dogs. And if we don't stop him, he'll just keep doing it. Finn escaped, but what about the others? They deserve a chance too. Mark sighed, sitting down beside her. You're a lot braver than I give you credit for, kiddo. Sophia smiled faintly. I learned from the best. The next day, they began planning their next move. Sophia reached out to Officer Daniels. sharing everything they had seen at Tobias's facility. Daniels agreed to help but warned them to proceed with caution. Meanwhile, Mark began researching Tobias's business, looking for any clues that could tie him to illegal activities. Sophia and Finn worked together, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Finn's protective instincts never wavered, and Sophia knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. But Tobias wasn't idle. He had already begun plotting his next move, determined to reclaim what he believed was his. And this time, he wouldn't make the mistake of underestimating them. The following week was a whirlwind of preparation. Sophia and Mark worked tirelessly with Officer Daniels to gather evidence against Tobias Bennett. They compiled everything: photos of Finn's scars, the conditions of the other dogs in the warehouse, and reports from neighbors who had seen suspicious activity around Tobias's facility. But Daniels warned them that without irrefutable evidence of ongoing abuse, getting a warrant to shut down Tobias's operation would be difficult. "We need something concrete," Daniels said during a late-night meeting at the Carter house. "Something that proves he's not just running a training facility, but exploiting and abusing these dogs." Sophia frowned, her fingers absently stroking Finn's fur. "There has to be something we missed. Finn wouldn't be the only one he hurt. What about the other dogs?" Mark leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "We saw dozens of cages in that warehouse. If we can document what's happening there and show the conditions, it might be enough." Daniels hesitated. "You'd need to get inside the facility again to do that. It's too risky." Sophia met his gaze, her voice steady. "We don't have a choice. If we don't stop him, those dogs won't get another chance." The next night, Sophia, Mark, and Finn made their way back to Tobias's facility. This time, they weren't alone. Daniels had arranged for a small team of officers to remain on standby, ready to move in if they found anything incriminating. "We'll give you 30 minutes, Daniels said, handing Sophia a small camera. "Get what you can, but don't engage with Tobias or his men. As soon as you have the evidence, signal us, and we'll move in." Sophia nodded, her heart pounding. "We'll be careful." Mark gave her a reassuring nod, though she could see the worry in his eyes. "Stick close to me, and if anything feels wrong, we get out." "Agreed. Agreed," Sophia said, clutching Finn's leash tightly. They entered through the same hole in the fence, careful to avoid the cameras. The warehouse was quiet, but the faint sound of barking echoed from deep within. Sophia's stomach churned as they crept through the aisles of cages. Many of the dogs were awake, their eyes wide with fear. Some whimpered softly, while others growled, their trust in humans clearly shattered. Sophia's chest tightened at the sight. Mark began filming with the camera, documenting the filthy conditions and the injuries on the dogs. "This is worse than I thought," he muttered. Sophia knelt beside one of the cages, where a small terrier cowered in the corner. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice breaking. "We're going to help you." Finn stayed close, his presence seeming to calm the other dogs. He moved silently beside Sophia, his ears flicking at every sound. Just as they were finishing, the warehouse lights suddenly flickered on, flooding the space with harsh light. Tobias's voice echoed through the building, cold and mocking. Well, back so soon?" Sophia spun around, her heart sinking as Tobias stepped into view, flanked by his two men. "I warned you," Tobias said, his eyes narrowing. "You should have stayed out of this." Mark stepped in front of Sophia, holding the camera tightly. "We've got everything we need, Bennett. The police are on their way. It's over." Tobias laughed, a sound that sent chills down Sophia's spine. "You think a few pictures are going to stop me? By the time your little friends in blue get here, this place will be empty." He snapped his fingers, and his men began advancing. Before Tobias's men could reach them, Finn stepped forward, his body tense and his growl deep. His presence froze them in their tracks. And for a moment, no one moved. "Get that dog," Tobias ordered, his voice sharp. One of the men lunged toward Finn, but the dog was faster. He dodged the grab and leapt forward, his teeth sinking into the man's arm. The man screamed, falling back as Finn released him and stood protectively in front of Sophia. The second man hesitated, clearly reevaluating his chances against Finn. Tobias's expression darkened. Enough of this. He pulled a taser from his pocket and aimed it at Finn. "No!" Sophia shouted, stepping in front of Finn. Tobias froze, his eyes narrowing. "Move, girl. That dog belongs to me." Sophia's hands clenched into fists. "Finn doesn't belong to anyone, and if you want him, you'll have to go through me." Before Tobias could respond, the sound of sirens filled the air. Red and blue lights flashed outside as Daniels and his team stormed the facility. "Pinewood police, step away from them," Daniels shouted, his gun drawn. Tobias cursed under his breath, dropping the taser as officers surrounded him and his men. Mark handed the camera to Daniels, his voice steady. "We've got everything. The cages, the dogs, the scars. It's all there." Daniels nodded, his gaze hard as he turned to Tobias. "You're done, Bennett. This time, you're not walking away." As officers secured the facility and began rescuing the dogs, Sophia knelt beside Finn, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You were amazing," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Finn licked her cheek, his tail wagging gently. Mark placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression softening. "You did good, kid." Sophia smiled through her tears, feeling a surge of relief and pride. They had done it. Finn was safe, and Tobias's reign of cruelty was finally over. But as they watched the last of the dogs being loaded into rescue vans, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. There were more dogs out there, more people like Tobias who needed to be stopped. And with Finn by her side, she knew they could make a difference. The morning after Tobias's arrest, the town of Pinewood was buzzing with activity. News of the raid on his facility spread quickly, and the sight of animal rescue vans leaving with dozens of dogs had become the talk of the town. For the first time in years, Pinewood was united, not by gossip or routine, but by a shared sense of justice. Sophia woke up to find Finn curled up at the foot of her bed, his tail wagging slightly when she opened her eyes. She smiled and reached out to stroke his fur. "We did it, buddy," she whispered. "You're safe now." Downstairs, Mark was sitting at the kitchen table with Officer Daniels, reviewing the evidence they had gathered. The photos and footage were damning, and with Tobias and his men in custody, the case was strong. "This should be enough to put him away for a long time," Daniels said, sipping his coffee. "And the dogs we rescued, most of them are already being treated and evaluated by the state rescue team." Mark nodded. "What about Finn?" Daniels smiled faintly. "That's up to you. He's officially been cleared as a stray, and since you've been caring for him, the shelter's willing to let you keep him. If you want to, that is." Sophia, who had been eavesdropping from the stairs, nearly tripped in her excitement. She ran into the kitchen, throwing her arms around Finn's neck. "He's ours?" she asked, her eyes wide with hope. Mark hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, kiddo, he's ours." Sophia beamed, hugging Finn tightly as tears of relief streamed down her face. Later that day, Sophia and Mark visited the local rescue center to see the other dogs from Tobias's facility. It was a sobering sight. Many of the dogs were scared and malnourished, their bodies marked by scars both visible and invisible. Sophia knelt beside a cage holding a trembling Labrador mix. "It's okay," she whispered, just as she had with Finn. "You're safe now." The staff at the rescue center praised Sophia's courage and compassion, and several volunteers even recognized Finn from the news. "He's become a bit of a local hero," one of them said with a smile. Back in Pinewood, the community had rallied together in an unexpected way. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves were now organizing fundraisers and adoption drives. The local high school shop class even volunteered to build new kennels for the rescue center. Mrs. Carmichael, the town's notoriously nosy librarian, approached Sophia one afternoon while she was walking Finn. "I must admit," she said, adjusting her glasses, "I never thought I'd see this town come together like this. But you and that dog of yours, you've inspired something." "Child," Sophia blushed, not knowing how to respond. "I just wanted to help," she said simply. A month later, Tobias Bennett faced trial. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Video footage of the facility, testimony from former employees, and the condition of the rescued dogs. Sophia and Mark attended the trial, sitting in the back of the courtroom with Finn lying quietly at their feet. When the judge read the verdict, guilty on multiple counts of animal cruelty and illegal operations, the courtroom erupted in whispers. Tobias, who had maintained his arrogance throughout the trial, finally looked defeated as he was led away in handcuffs. As they left the courthouse, reporters swarmed around Sophia and Mark, asking questions about their role in exposing Tobias. Mark shielded Sophia from the cameras, but she surprised him by stepping forward to speak. "Finn isn't just a dog," she said, her voice steady despite the crowd. "He's my family, and no animal, no living being, should ever be treated like property. What happened to Finn and the other dogs wasn't just wrong. It was cruel, but today, we proved that people can make a difference. You just have to be brave enough to try." The crowd fell silent for a moment before breaking into applause. Sophia glanced down at Finn, who wagged his tail as if to say, "Good job." With Tobias behind bars and his facility shut down, life in Pinewood began to settle back into its quiet rhythm. But for Sophia, Mark, and Finn, things would never be the same. Their bond had grown stronger through the ordeal, and they had discovered a shared purpose: helping animals in need. One sunny afternoon, Sophia and Mark stood outside the newly renovated Pinewood Animal Sanctuary. The rescue center had expanded thanks to donations and volunteer work, and it now served as a beacon of hope for animals and people alike. Sophia smiled as she watched Finn play with a group of children in the sanctuary's yard. "He's not just a hero," she said to Mark. "He's a teacher. He's showing everyone what love and trust can do." Mark nodded, his gaze softening as he watched his daughter. "You know, you've taught me a thing or two about love and trust." "Too," Sophia laughed, nudging him playfully. "Guess we've all learned a lot from Finn." As the weeks turned into months, Finn became a symbol of resilience and kindness in Pinewood. His story inspired other towns to take action against animal cruelty, and Sophia even started a blog to share updates about Finn and the sanctuary. One evening, as Sophia sat on the porch with Finn by her side, she looked out at the quiet streets of Pinewood. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and the air was filled with the sound of laughter from the sanctuary. "We did it, Finn," she said softly. "We made a difference." Finn leaned against her, his blue eyes filled with contentment. Together, they had faced danger, injustice, and fear, and together, they had found healing, hope, and a new beginning. As the stars began to appear in the sky, Sophia closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you for choosing me." The Pinewood Animal Sanctuary had become a hub of activity in the months following Tobias Bennett's trial. Every day brought new challenges: rehabilitating scared and injured dogs, organizing adoption events, and educating the community about animal welfare. For Sophia, it was a dream come true. Finn had fully embraced his role as the sanctuary's ambassador. His calm, protective nature made him a natural leader among the rescued dogs, and his story continued to inspire visitors. Parents brought their children to meet the hero dog, and even people who had never considered adopting began to see the value of giving a stray a second chance. One rainy afternoon, Sophia was cleaning kennels when she noticed a man standing outside the sanctuary's gates. He wore a dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat that obscured most of his face. Sophia wiped her hands on her jeans and walked over, Finn trailing closely behind her. "Hi there," she called out, Can I help you? The man hesitated before stepping closer. His eyes, sharp and calculating, flicked to Finn. That's quite the dog you've got there, he said, his voice low. Sophia felt a prickle of unease. His name's Finn. He's part of our sanctuary family. Are you looking to adopt? The man chuckled, though the sound was devoid of warmth. Not exactly. I've been hearing a lot about this place, and about your involvement in shutting down Tobias Bennett. Impressive work for a kid. Sophia bristled at his tone. It wasn't just me. The whole community came together to make it happen. The man nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on Finn. Well, it seems you've stirred up more than just a little local attention. Not everyone's happy about what you've done. What do you mean? Sophia asked, her voice steady despite the unease creeping into her chest. The man didn't answer directly. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper, handing it to her. Let's just say Tobias wasn't the only one running this kind of operation. Keep your eyes open, kid. Before Sophia could ask anything else, the man turned and disappeared into the rain. Back inside, Sophia unfolded the paper. It was a map, marked with red circles around several towns and cities, all within a few hundred miles of Pinewood. Scribbled in the corner was a single word: facilitators. She showed the map to Mark and Officer Daniels that evening. Daniels frowned as he studied it. These locations, they could be other facilities like Tobias's. If that's true, we're dealing with a network, not just one rogue trainer. Mark's jaw tightened. If there's even a chance this is real, we have to do something. We can't let this continue. Daniels nodded. I'll send this to the state authorities. They might already have investigations underway. But Sophia, Mark, this is bigger than anything we've dealt with before. You need to be careful. That night, Sophia sat on her bed with Finn at her feet. The map spread out before her. She traced her fingers over the red circles, her mind racing. We can't just stop now. Finn, she whispered, if there are more dogs out there, more places like Tobias's, we have to help. Finn's ears perked up at her voice, and he rested his head on her knee, his blue eyes filled with quiet understanding. But the next morning, Mark sat Sophia down for a serious talk. I know you want to help, he said gently, and I'm proud of you for caring so much. But this isn't just about helping dogs anymore. These people are dangerous. Sophia, you saw what Tobias was willing to do to get Finn back. Sophia met his gaze, her expression firm. I'm not afraid that Finn and we can make a difference. Mark sighed. I know you're brave, but bravery doesn't mean putting yourself in harm's way. If we're going to do this, we need to be smart. No more running into dangerous situations without a plan. Agreed. Sophia hesitated, then nodded. Agreed. True to her word, Sophia didn't act impulsively. Instead, she turned to the community that had already proven its strength. At the next town meeting, she stood up and shared what she had learned. These places aren't just hurting animals, she said, holding up the map. They're hurting our trust, our values. We stopped Tobias, but there's more out there. If we come together again, we can make a difference, not just here, but everywhere. The room was silent for a moment before Mrs. Carmichael stood, clutching her ever-present notebook. I'll help organize another fundraiser, she said firmly. We can raise money for more supplies and outreach. Others quickly followed, offering their support in any way they could. The high school shop class volunteered to help build portable kennels for emergency rescues, and local businesses pledged donations. As plans took shape, Finn became more than just a symbol, he became a leader. During a training session at the sanctuary, Sophia watched as Finn guided a nervous German shepherd through an obstacle course. The younger dog had been rescued from Tobias's facility and was still skittish around people. Finn moved slowly and deliberately, demonstrating each step with patience. By the end of the session, the shepherd was following him with confidence. Sophia smiled, pride swelling in her chest. You're amazing, Finn, she said softly, We couldn't do this without you. A week later, Officer Daniels received a tip about one of the locations marked on the map, a remote property in the next county. It was rumored to be housing dogs in illegal conditions, but the authorities needed proof before they could act. Sophia, Mark, and Finn volunteered to assist, working alongside Daniels and a small team of volunteers. Their mission: document the conditions and provide enough evidence for a raid. As they approached the property under cover of darkness, Sophia felt the familiar mix of fear and determination. She glanced at Finn, who walked steadily beside her, his ears alert and his posture calm. "We've got this," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. But as they moved closer, the faint sound of barking reached their ears, and with it, the unmistakable tension of a new challenge waiting just ahead. The night was dark and silent, save for the occasional rustling of leaves as the team moved cautiously through the woods. The property they were investigating was an old, rundown farm surrounded by dense trees, its only source of light coming from a single bulb flickering above the barn's entrance. Sophia crouched low beside Finn, her flashlight off to avoid drawing attention. Mark was just ahead of her, signaling for them to stay close. Officer Daniels and 2 other volunteers flanked them, each carrying cameras and recording equipment to document what they found. Finn's ears twitched, and his body tensed as they neared the barn. Sophia placed a reassuring hand on his back, her heart pounding. She whispered softly, "Easy, Finn. We've got this." Daniels motioned for the group to stop, scanning the area with a pair of binoculars. "No guards," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "But that doesn't mean it's safe. Stay sharp." The group reached the barn without incident, but the moment they stepped inside, the smell hit them, a pungent mix of urine, feces, and decay. Sophia gagged, covering her nose and mouth with her sleeve. Rows of cages lined the walls, each one filled with dogs in various states of distress. Some were barking frantically, while others cowered in silence, their eyes dull and lifeless. Sophia's stomach turned as she took in the scene. "This is worse than Tobias's place," she whispered, her voice trembling. Mark began filming, his jaw clenched. "We need to document everything. The authorities need to see this." Daniels nodded, snapping photos with his phone. "Let's move quickly. We don't know how long we have before someone shows up." As they worked, Finn suddenly let out a low growl, his body stiffening. Sophia froze, her eyes darting toward the barn's entrance. "What is it?" Mark whispered, stepping closer to his daughter. Finn's growl deepened, and a moment later, the sound of distant voices reached their ears. "Someone's coming," Daniels hissed. "Hide!" The group scattered, ducking behind stacks of hay and old farm equipment. Sophia pulled Finn with her, crouching behind a rusted tractor. 2 men entered the barn, both dressed in dark clothing. One carried a flashlight, while the other had a clipboard. "How many dogs are ready to ship?" the man with the flashlight asked, his voice sharp. "About a dozen," the other replied, glancing at his clipboard. "The buyers are expecting them by the end of the week." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. "Buyers?" She exchanged a horrified glance with Mark, who was crouched behind a hay bale nearby. Finn remained perfectly still beside her, his blue eyes fixed on the men. As the men inspected the cages, one of the volunteers accidentally knocked over a metal bucket, the loud clang echoing through the barn. "What was that?" one of the men demanded. Spinning around, Daniels reacted quickly, stepping out from his hiding spot with his hands raised. "Hey, I'm with the police. Don't do anything stupid." The 2 men froze, their expressions shifting from surprise to anger. The one with the flashlight pulled out a walkie-talkie and barked into it. "We've got company. Get over here. Time to go," Daniels shouted, motioning for the others to run. Sophia grabbed Finn's leash and bolted for the exit, Mark close behind her. Chaos erupted as more men appeared, their shouts mixing with the frantic barking of the dogs. As they reached the edge of the woods, one of the men caught up to them, Grabbing Sophia's arm, she let out a startled cry, struggling to break free. Before Mark could react, Finn lunged at the man, his teeth sinking into the sleeve of his jacket. The man yelped, releasing Sophia as he tried to shake Finn off. "Finn, let go!" Sophia shouted. Finn obeyed immediately, retreating to her side with a low growl. The man stumbled back, clutching his arm, but didn't pursue them further. Mark pulled Sophia to her feet. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she said, her voice shaky. Thanks to Finn, the group managed to escape the property and regrouped at a safe distance. Daniels radioed for backup, relaying everything they had seen and heard. Sophia sat on the ground, catching her breath as she stroked Finn's fur. "You were incredible," she whispered. Finn licked her hand, his tail wagging gently. Mark knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You were brave, sophomore, but we can't keep taking risks like this." Sophia met his gaze, her expression determined. "We had to do it, Dad. Those dogs needed us." Daniels approached them, his face grim. "The good news is, we have enough evidence to shut this place down. The bad news is, they know we're onto them. This isn't over." Back in Pinewood, the team reconvened at the sanctuary to plan their next move. Sophia couldn't shake the memory of the dogs in the barn, their terrified eyes, their desperate barks. "We can't stop now," she said during the meeting. "This is bigger than just one farm. If there's a network, we have to shut it all down." Daniels nodded. "The authorities will handle the legal side, but we'll need to stay vigilant. These people won't go down without a fight." Mark looked at Sophia, his expression a mix of pride and concern. "If we're going to keep doing this, we do it together. No more running off on your own." Sophia smiled faintly. "Deal." That evening, as Sophia sat on the porch with Finn, she thought about everything they had been through. The battle against Tobias had felt like the end, but now she realized it was only the beginning. Finn rested his head on her lap, his blue eyes gazing up at her. She scratched behind his ears, her heart swelling with gratitude and determination. "We're not done yet, Finn," she said softly, "but as long as we're together, I know we can handle anything." Finn's tail thumped against the wooden porch, as if to say, "I'm with you." In the distance, the first stars began to appear, their light cutting through the darkness. For Sophia and Finn, the fight wasn't over, but neither was their hope. The days following the raid on the farm were a blur of activity. News of the operation spread quickly, bringing both attention and pressure. Sophia, Mark, and Finn found themselves at the center of a growing movement to expose the hidden network of illegal dog trafficking operations. The evidence collected from the farm was enough to secure a warrant for a broader investigation. Authorities began linking the farm to similar facilities across the region, confirming the existence of a coordinated network. But the fight was far from over. One evening, as the Carter family prepared for dinner, there was a loud knock at the door. Mark opened it cautiously, finding a plain envelope on the porch. Inside was a single piece of paper with a chilling message. "You've gone too far. Stay out of our business, or you'll regret it." Mark's jaw tightened as he showed the note to Sophia. "This is serious," he said, his voice low. Sophia read the note, her hands trembling. "They're scared," she said, her fear giving way to determination. "That means we're doing something right." Mark frowned. "Sophomore, this isn't a game. These people are dangerous." "I know," Sophia replied, her voice steady. "But we can't stop now. If we back down, they win." A week later, Daniels informed the Carters that authorities had identified the main hub of the trafficking network, a large industrial facility hidden in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of a nearby city. "This is it," Daniels said during a late-night meeting. "If we can shut this place down, we'll cripple the entire operation." Sophia and Mark insisted on helping. Daniels was hesitant at first but eventually agreed, knowing their experience with Finn could be invaluable. The night of the raid, Sophia sat in the back of the police van with Finn at her side. She stroked his fur, her thoughts racing. "You ready for this, buddy?" she whispered. Finn licked her hand, his tail wagging slightly. Mark sat beside her, his expression serious. "No matter what happens, stick close to me. Got it?" Sophia nodded, her resolve unwavering. The warehouse loomed in the distance, its windows dark and foreboding. The police surrounded the building, their flashlights cutting through the night. Daniels gave the signal, and the team moved in. The front doors were forced open, and officers flooded inside. The scene was chaotic. Dozens of dogs were crammed into cages, their barks echoing off the metal walls. Several men attempted to flee, but they were quickly apprehended. Sophia and Finn stayed close to Mark, helping to calm the dogs as officers worked to free them. One by one, the cages were opened, and the dogs were led outside to safety. But as Sophia approached the back of the warehouse, she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. A faint whimper coming from a locked storage room. Sophia called for Mark and Daniels, then opened the door. Inside, she found a small group of terrified puppies, huddled together in a filthy crate. "Finn, guard the door," she said as she knelt to examine the puppies. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, one of the ringleaders. Armed with a crowbar, he lunged toward Sophia, but Finn sprang into action, placing himself between her and the man. Finn growled, his teeth bared as the man hesitated. "Call him off," the man snarled, his grip tightening on the crowbar. Sophia stood her ground. "No, you're not hurting anyone else." Before the man could react, Mark and Daniels arrived, disarming him and placing him in handcuffs. Finn relaxed, his growl fading as he returned to Sophia's side. "Good boy," she whispered, her hands shaking as she hugged him. By dawn, the warehouse was empty, and the rescue dogs were on their way to safety. The ringleaders were taken into custody, and Daniels confirmed that the operation had successfully dismantled the trafficking network. Sophia and Mark stood outside the warehouse, watching as the last of the dogs were loaded into rescue vans. "You did good, kiddo," Mark said, resting a hand on her shoulder. "We did good," Sophia replied, smiling as she looked at Finn. The weeks that followed were filled with hope and healing. The Pinewood Animal Sanctuary expanded its efforts, partnering with rescue organizations to rehabilitate and rehome the dogs saved from the warehouse. Sophia's story gained national attention, inspiring others to stand up against animal cruelty. She was invited to speak at events, where she shared her journey and emphasized the importance of compassion and courage. Finn became a symbol of resilience, his story touching the hearts of people across the country. One quiet evening, Sophia sat on the porch with Finn, watching the sunset. The air was filled with the sounds of the sanctuary, happy barks, playful growls, and the laughter of volunteers. "We did it, Finn," she said softly. "We made a difference." Finn leaned against her, his blue eyes full of contentment. As the first stars appeared in the sky, Sophia smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning. There would always be more work to do, more lives to save, but with Finn by her side, she was ready for whatever came next.